Chairman of the Parish Council, the Chairman of the Fundraising Trust, George Tickle.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to you all. Today we have various representatives of organisations that have helped over the last few years. I should also, as I say, thank the National Lottery. I'm delighted to hand George a cheque for £120,000, which he asked me to have made out to cash.
The most important part is the cutting of the first sod. And who better to do this than Grace Taylor, who has lived in the village for 86 years, who has seen many a change, but when asked what she thought about our new village hall, she says it's wonderful. So let's hope it is. Over to Grace. Your bottom.
I think the village hall is really the centre of village life. Now, of course, we have a magnificent new village hall, which is even better. This, in fact, is not in the centre of the village. It's on the main road from Exeat through to Eastbourne, where Gore Farm straddled the main road. The hall in 1929, when they converted it, it was a barn, of course. It's said that the building goes back to about 1260, contemporaneous with the Bardolph Hall. It was renovated, in my view, during Jacobean times, the early 1600s. What they did do, of course, was use it for plays. I say the original village hall because, of course, there's always the Farrer Hall.
Major Farrer was very interested in helping the local Boy Scouts as they set up, but they had no base. So he bought two old army huts, First World War, which were originally ammunition huts. So they actually put on plays in here. They did the famous 1066 and all that. Incredible, behind these curtains hung on bits of string. Really incredible.
We had the Millennium there because this wasn't opened as such then. And we crammed in there for our New Year's Eve supper, and the condensation was running down the windows. We couldn't wash up, there was too much. So everybody who were organising it, we all took our dishes and bowls and everything home to wash them up at home. That in itself was a little hub. All the fun things in there. The serious stuff was in the village hall proper, on the main road there.
During the war, it sort of fell in disrepair, really, and it was a bit of a dump. But us children used to break in there and sit in there and have a smoke or something. Now they store fencing materials and some of the volunteers that are in the summer camp out inside.
Then it comes to 1978. The problem was where to put it. It was looked at the recreation ground, but the Davis Gilberts have covenants on it and said nothing was to be built larger than the pavilion. We also looked at the Farrer Hall. The National Trust were happy for that to be pulled down, a bigger hall built. Then East Sussex said no, it was too dangerous coming in and out of the drive to the Farrer Hall. Wildham were going to build this car park, and at the time they were going to put the road straight up so that there wouldn't have been much room to the south of it. And my husband Sid said, why don't we put a curve in the road? And then all the grants disappeared, so that it was all put on hold again.
The first plan that went in showed the hall on the other side of the road that comes in from Gilbert's Drive, where the electric charging points are. And that was refused, I think quite rightly.
The village had outgrown the two halls. We formed a committee and raised some money. Immediately there were people on the estate anti. One particular gentleman said, it'll be a white elephant, we should be paying for this the rest of our lives, nobody will use it, it'll be too expensive to book.
There was actually an awful lot of opposition, within the village, including the lady who shall be nameless, who would sit in the horse field with a placard saying no village hall, day after day.
It was unbelievable. There was one gentleman who's now passed away, and he literally went out of the village gathering all his friends to vote against anything that was to do with the hall. He wouldn't come until, do you know, about 3 or 4 years ago, when suddenly he appeared at a village lunch. I think it was Tina had encouraged him to come along. Can't believe it. A man who was so vehemently against it. But he wasn't the only one.
There was an association in the village called East Dean Preservation Society who wanted to leave everything as it was. They didn't want a new hall. And they were very vociferous. They got onto the parish council each time there was a parish council election. One election, there were 32 people stood for 14 seats.
Eventually, they had a public meeting where people were screaming at the back, and somebody was saying, you know, you can't take away a green field, which it isn't, because already the car park had been built then. This plot here was reserved, as far as we knew, for the new village hall. Then the builders started digging it out. The people still in opposition were throwing things around and tried to sabotage it, but it didn't succeed, thankfully.
Then in the early 90s, it was decided we should look again, and a committee was brought up to try and look and see where the hall could go and how we could raise the money. And we couldn't at that time. Perhaps there could be a hall cum pavilion. The horse field would be swapped for the recreation ground so that it was all together in the middle of the village. But that didn't materialise because Wealdon didn't like it on the north of the road, and the Davis Gilberts didn't want to swap the horse field for the recreation ground. And then eventually George Tickle took over, and he'd been manager of Birdseye. He then got a new committee together. Plans had already been drawn up for the hall, the previous committee.
Percy Grave drew it up, who was a local architect. He drew it up first. And then Ken Thurman, who worked for Llewellyn's, the big builders in Eastbourne, and he said, well, I can redesign that.
And he did have stumbling blocks because, for example, he so much wanted flint on its exterior. He had, in the end, to have these stones in blocks because it's too expensive to get them individually placed. And he wanted everything to be perfect.
We got most of the things that people wanted. You can't get it all, but you can get most of it because they wanted to start a badminton club. Had to be long enough for short mat bowls.
Very much in keeping with the village without being ostentatious. It was practical, the right size, the right number of rooms for all the things that go on in the village.
We then started raising money. Francis Mace did a lottery, which was drawn at the parish council every month.
My first event I did was in the Farrow Hall, which was an antique and collectors fair, when I started a fitness group. And then as soon as the hall opened, I continued with the classes in the hall and the antique fairs in the hall.
And eventually East Sussex gave us 10,000 and Wealdon 10,000 towards it. They had previously applied for the lottery funding and we got 120,000 granted.
When the builders got so far and the steelwork went up, and they put up this really what looked like a giraffe house cage, and people were complaining about that. They said, far too high, it looks like a giraffe house. And I was talking to the foreman of the builders here, and he said, well, it's funny you should say that, because when they first put the top sections up, I had to go to the shed and measure up from the plans to make sure we hadn't made a mistake. It actually turned out it was a perfect measurement.
He designed those because A, he wanted the hall high enough for badminton, which it is, and he also wanted the view over the fields. I think he did a wonderful job and he loved doing it.
And then at one point we thought we were going to have to build the shell of the hall, finish the small hall and the kitchen and toilets, and then to later date finish the large hall. But a lady in the village anonymously gave the rest of the money that was needed, I think 30 or 35,000. Then when we were getting on with the hall, Wealdon suddenly said, where are you going to park all the cars? You'll block our car park at the top. So the hall then raised funds for these two bottom bays in the car park, Again, the same lady gave a load more money to help finish and get these done.
I remember coming to the first council meeting, and I think that was the day when it actually opened. I've got a feeling the council had a meeting first, and then we had a grand opening ceremony. The vicar blessed it. There was various speeches went on, and from then on, the hall was active. Ron Laws set up the badminton, which was something completely new. They had table tennis and things. Immediately things started off. They had a sort of a youth club at one time. They had a women's institute, of course. There was two women's institutes at the time. The players supplied all the lighting and originally paid for the sound system. We did Tartuffe and the Prodigious Snob, which I was a young page in, of about sort of 13 years old.
Murdered to death. Yeah, I played the butler, and the butler did actually do it. Yeah, yes. Yeah,
I did do that very well being a drunk.
Thank you. I was quite a sober person, but then when I liked the sherry. I was rather too fond of the sherry, and yes, that's when I became drunk and insulted everybody. We only did it for 3 nights, and some people came back to watch it again because they thought it was so funny. There was a lot of support for East Dean players, and it was very sad that its demise.
For years there was a flower show which was run by the cricket club in the cricket field in a marquee. Eventually they moved it down to the manor, and that was until the hall was built, and Davis Gilbert then said, well, you don't need to come down here anymore, you can set up in the hall, and it's been here ever since. And that's got bigger and bigger, but it's going on, and it'll go on forever, I think.
The market has been here for 22 years and I've been running it for 5. I believe when it first opened, it was just in the car park, and then over the winter months they asked if they could come inside. So some of the stallholders will come along, they don't necessarily sell anything, but they meet their friends, they meet their customers. It is their community, it may well be their one day out. For other stallholders, it is their way to reach out into the community and run their business. So for many people it's a lifeline, but it's a lifeline in different ways. A lot of residents no longer come down and access the market, and so especially this time of year we are very, very much supported by the tourists, the open top bus and people on holiday. We provide not only foods and crafts, we also provide a community for customers to come and catch up with people, whether it be in the cafe, whether it be a stall holder. I would say the market is so much more than a market.
Trying to get people in the door to realise how good all the things are. It's such a wonderful village, it's a wonderful community, and that hall brings everybody in and we all meet up, and it's really good in that respect. A lot of people who are on their own, they say, oh, you know, we're on our own. I say, well, just come to it. The people are so friendly here, and they come and they don't think they're on their own. They really enjoy being at the events that's held in the hall.
I love going to the films, I go to the quiz night, I go to the bingo. I think there's always going to be somebody wanting to come along and try something else, or try something that's been happening before, but maybe they're better at doing it or got a different outlook on it. So I think there's a lot to look forward to, yeah.
I do use it. There is so much going on. There's an art society, a local one, where they gather together and produce their lovely, lovely pictures. It looks very different in all its different uses.
It is a very important building, a very important part of the village as a whole. This really is something which surely must go on and on.
We look upon ourselves as custodians of this village hall. It was always a little bit too small. We came in 2003, but immediately we could see the benefits of the new hall. We could appreciate the amount of work and energy that had gone to actually build it.
George Tickle was insistent that the hall was finished to a very high standard so it could be let out for weddings and things like that to help with the finances.
I think it's a beautiful setting. I think we're very lucky to have it. I think it's a centre which provides interests in various ways. Whatever your interest is, I think there is something here for everybody.
We're very lucky to have it in place, and big thank you to all the people that actually thought of putting it there in the first place, and those that run it today. I know it's not an easy job, things need repairing, and so on. But in the adverts that we put for when we're supporting the village hall, we always put all profits to support our wonderful village hall, which it is an amazing asset.
Looking back at it now, all that was so worth it when I see what we've got now for the benefit of the village and other people.
25 years on, it's still doing exactly what it was built to do, which is to serve the community and bring people in, draw people in. A wonderful, wonderful building, just as this was during its day.
It's a huge success. It's an all-purpose hall. I'm very proud of Ken.
A lot of the people here tonight were involved, like I was, in setting it up and raising funds, and still use the hall. And I hope the hall will go on long after we're dead and gone.